I'm up here in Seattle again with my dad. After breaking his hip, the wheel came off his walker and he cracked a vertebra. So the fun never ends. Today, I thought I would just share with you about dogma. I've, it's occurred to me that dogma is not all the same. There are different levels. Just about everyone in our world lives a story-based life. And as I keep saying and harping on, the existential shift allows story to become an expression of your existence rather than the foundation of your existence. But we live in a world where just about everyone is basing their life on their story, whether that's a religious story or the story of their success or their money or whatever it may be. But not all stories are the same. When story becomes a foundation, it is a dogma. It's something that you're depending on, that you have to defend. But dogma comes in different strengths, different grades, if you will. So let me just point out three. First of all, there are just the silent dogmatists. And this is most people, where they have their story, but they just kind of keep it to themselves. They get it. Everybody sort of has their story. And I have mine, and I don't come right out and hit you with it or whatever. It's a private thing. It's a personal thing. Here's my story. Here's what I'm doing. I'm basing my life on this, but I just keep it to myself. The personal, private dogma. Nothing, horrible about this. I think that it's going to crack like all story-based living. Even if it's private, at some point it's going to crack because, well, the specters tear it apart. And I've said a lot about that, so I'll not go into that again. But okay, so private dogma. The second level, though, would be somebody who believes so much in their story that they think you ought to, believe in it too. And I call this evangelistic dogma. So it's the dogma that says, I'm not going to force this on you, but I really think you need to know the good news, brother. And of course, that's what I would have been for most of my life as a believer in Jesus. I would be like, everybody needs to know this. And, I'm not going to cram it down your throat. I'm not going to force you to believe it. But man, am I going to try to convince you to receive the good news, to be changed by these truths that I know to be so, wonderful. So this is the evangelistic dogma, that these people could be obnoxious sometimes, maybe, or, they might be just really polite and kind about it, but still very much, it's not just that I believe my story. My story is the story everybody ought to believe. So, and that could be, again, that could be a political story. That could be a religious story. That could be just, here's how a family ought to be. Or everybody ought to be a backpacker, or everybody ought to be into art or music, or I don't know, whatever your thing is. The evangelistic dogmatist. But the third level of dogma is one where things get kind of ugly. I call it militant dogma. And that's where the dogma becomes not something I'm trying to encourage you to buy into, but something that I am so sure about that I feel that the world needs to be forced into this dogma. Lots of examples of this. None of them are pretty, but the Crusades would be an example, where whole populations were baptized in the name of Jesus, right? We're saving them by forcing them to adopt our dogma. I think the whole idea of white nationalism is an example of militant dogma. It's not that we have this way that we want to encourage you as best. It's that, white people are better than other people. Christian people are better than other people. Everybody, not just it would be a good idea, but everyone has to do this. And if we don't do this, gosh, we're in trouble. So we have to force our dogma on you. And sadly, I think we have a lot of that in our government, and you might even say on both sides of the political spectrum right now, that there is militant dogma. And that's very un-American, by the way. I love that our nation is founded on like this idea of religious freedom. It's kind of like you're free to have your story, to pursue your happiness. This idea that we would force our story, whether it be religious or otherwise, on other people. Militant dogmatism is very anti-American, if you ask me. So there you have it. Three different forms of dogma. There is the personal dogma, there is evangelistic dogma, and there is militant dogma. Of course, what I think is it's best to just do away with dogma and go through this existential shift that I talked about last week, where you learn not to base your life on story, but where the story becomes the expression of your yes to life, which I have detailed, last week and in other places ad nauseum. Hopefully it's, they say if a good kindergarten teacher, the secret of any good teacher is repeat the important stuff. And as these months are rolling by, as I'm making these videos, I am noticing repetition of the important stuff. I hope it's starting to make some sense to you.